If you want her out of my house, then arrest me. The words didn't echo because no one dared to repeat them. Two police officers stood on Caleb Whitmore's front porch, their patrol lights casting quiet red and blue reflections across the frost-covered yard, but no sirens wailed, no voices rose. The winter air in Cedar Ridge, Colorado hovered just below 20 degrees, cold enough to sting the lungs, cold enough to make a 17-year-old girl tremble behind him in an oversized gray hoodie that clearly wasn't hers. Officer Daniels cleared his throat. Mr. Whitmore, she's listed as a missing minor. Caleb didn't step aside. He didn't raise his voice. He just rested one steady hand on the edge of the door. She was freezing, he said. I opened it. 3 weeks earlier, the wind had been worse. It rattled the loose gutter along the roof and swept powdery snow across Caleb's small half-acre lot like a warning. He had just put Noah to bed, tucking the quilt up to his son's chin, when the knock came. Not loud, not desperate, just 3 uneven taps against old wood. He paused. Another knock. Softer this time. He crossed the 10 feet from kitchen to entryway and opened the door to find a girl standing under the weak yellow porch light, sneakers soaked through, fingers pale, eyes too tired for someone her age. Please, she said, voice shaking but not broken. I won't cause trouble. I just need to get warm. He looked past her into the darkness. Empty road. Snow drifting. No car in sight. How far did you walk? He asked. Far enough. 3 words. Honest. He studied her face for a long second, the way he used to assess smoke patterns before running into a burning structure, not for danger, but for truth. He saw fear. He saw pride. He saw a kid trying not to fall apart. Behind him, Noah coughed in his sleep. Caleb stepped back and opened the door wider. Inside. Now. She hesitated. You don't even know me. You knocked, he replied. That's enough. The heater hummed as she stood near the vent, hands out, shivering, easing inch by inch. He set a bowl of canned chicken soup on the table, slid a glass of water beside it, and placed a folded blanket across the chair. Name? He asked gently. Avery. I'm Caleb. That's Noah's. Room down the hall. He's 9. This house has rules. We're honest. We're kind. We lock the door at night. She nodded, swallowing hard. I can leave in the morning. He shook his head once. We'll figure out tomorrow. The snow kept falling outside, soft against the windows, but inside the small 2-bedroom house something shifted. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just the quiet presence of another heartbeat under the same roof. Back on the porch now, under the flashing patrol lights, Avery's voice finally broke the silence. I asked him for help, she said. He didn't come looking for me. Caleb kept his eyes forward. She needed warmth, he repeated calmly. I gave her a door. And for a moment, even the officers seemed to understand that sometimes the strongest act a man can choose is not to push back, not to run, but simply to stand still with dignity when kindness is being questioned. The porch light flickered once in the winter wind, casting long shadows across the snow as Officer Daniels glanced at his partner and then back at Caleb. Mr. Whitmore, he said carefully, we are not here to make this harder than it has to be. Caleb nodded once, slow and steady. Neither am I. Avery stood just behind him, arms wrapped around herself, the borrowed gray hoodie hanging past her fingertips. The flashing lights painted her face in alternating red and blue, but she did not look like trouble. She looked tired. She looked 17. Your father reported you missing. The second officer added, softer now. There is paperwork. There are procedures. Avery swallowed. He reported me missing, she said quietly. But he did not report why I left. Silence settled between them like fresh snow. Caleb did not turn around, but he could hear the strain in her voice, the effort it took to remain composed. He spoke without drama, without defiance. She has been here 3 weeks. She has eaten at my table. She has done her homework at that kitchen counter. My son calls her by name, not by rumor. The officers shifted their weight. We need to bring her in so social services can evaluate the situation, Daniels explained. This is not an arrest. Caleb exhaled slowly, the cold air clouding in front of him. Then say that, he replied. Do not make it sound like she did something wrong. 3 short sentences. Calm. Direct. No anger. Just clarity. Inside the house, the heater kicked on again with a low hum. Noah stood in the hallway, small hands gripping the edge of the wall, eyes wide. Dad, he called softly. Caleb glanced back. It is okay, buddy. 2 words that carried more weight than he let show. Avery turned toward Noah. I am not in trouble, she told him gently. They just need to talk. The younger boy nodded, uncertain but trusting the tone more than the situation. Officer Daniels lowered his voice. Mr. Whitmore, you are a former firefighter. You understand liability. If something happened to her here. Caleb met his gaze for the first time. Nothing happened to her here, he said. That was the point. The wind moved through the pine trees along the property line, their branches whispering above the porch roof. The night felt suspended, as if waiting for someone to choose pride over patience. Caleb did not. He stepped slightly aside, not in surrender, but in cooperation. If she needs to answer questions, he said, I will drive her. I will sit in the waiting room. I will sign whatever form says she stayed warm in my home and was treated with respect. Avery looked up at him then, confusion and gratitude mixing in her eyes. You do not have to do that, she whispered. He offered a small shake of his head. I do not open my door halfway. The officers exchanged a glance. The tension that had hung heavy only minutes before began to thin. All right, Daniel said at last. No handcuffs. No lights. Just a conversation. Caleb nodded once more. Behind him, the house glowed softly against the dark Colorado night, a modest 2-bedroom place on half an acre of frozen ground. It was not large. It was not impressive, but it had become, for 3 weeks, a place where a girl who had walked miles in 20-degree weather could finally exhale. And as the patrol lights dimmed and the cold pressed in, the quiet truth remained. Sometimes dignity is not about winning a fight. It is about standing still long enough for kindness to be understood. The patrol car headlights faded down the narrow road, leaving only tire tracks pressed into the snow and a stillness that felt heavier than before. Caleb closed the front door slowly. Not with relief, not with fear, but with intention. The latch clicked into place. Avery stood near the kitchen table, her shoulders tense, eyes fixed on the wooden floorboards as if memorizing their pattern. Noah stepped closer to her, uncertain. Are you leaving? He asked. She hesitated. I do not know. 3 words, quieter this time. Caleb moved past them toward the stove, where a pot of water still sat from earlier. He turned the burner off and faced them both. No one is leaving tonight, he said evenly. We will talk in the morning. He pulled out a chair and sat down, folding his hands. The kitchen light cast a warm circle around the table, soft against the frost lining the windows. Avery, he began gently. They said your father reported you missing. She nodded once, jaw tight. He did. Do you want to tell me why you left? Silence stretched between them. The heater hummed. Snow brushed the siding outside. Avery lifted her eyes, and for the first time since that first night on the porch, the guard she wore like armor flickered. He is not a bad man in public, she said carefully. He is respected. He is successful. People believe him. She swallowed, searching for words that would not break apart as she spoke them. But being respected does not always mean being safe. Caleb did not interrupt. He did not lean forward or press for detail. He simply listened. 3 breaths passed. Avery continued. He decides everything. Who I talk to, where I go, what I study. He says it is for my future. He says it is for my protection, but it never feels like mine. Noah shifted beside her. So you ran away? He asked softly. She gave a faint nod. I walked. Caleb let that settle. How far? About 11 miles. The number lingered in the air. 11 miles in 20-degree weather, with no coat meant for winter, no plan beyond distance. Caleb's expression did not harden. It softened. That is a long walk, he said quietly. Avery's voice trembled despite her effort to steady it. I thought if I kept moving, I would find somewhere that did not feel like a cage. The word hung there. Cage. Not shouted. Not dramatic. Just honest. Caleb leaned back in his chair. You did not find a cage here, he said. It was not a question. Avery shook her head. No, another silence. Not awkward. Not empty. Just real. Caleb spoke again, calm and deliberate. Tomorrow we go down to the office. We tell the truth. Not loudly. Not angrily. Just clearly. You are not hiding here. You are choosing where you feel safe. Avery looked at him, confusion crossing her face. You would say that? I already did, he replied. Noah moved closer and tugged at Avery's sleeve. You can sleep in the extra room again, he offered. It is still yours. The word landed heavier than he realized. Yours. Avery blinked quickly, then nodded. Thank you. Caleb stood and turned off the kitchen light, leaving only the small lamp near the hallway glowing against the dark. Get some rest, he said. We handle daylight in daylight. As they moved toward their rooms, the house settled around them, wood creaking softly in the cold. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering footprints and tire tracks alike. Inside, something steadier remained. Not defiance, not rebellion, just a quiet decision to stand with someone who had finally stopped walking. Morning came without drama, just pale winter light slipping through the blinds and laying thin stripes across the kitchen floor. Caleb was already awake, standing at the stove in gray sweatpants and a worn thermal shirt, flipping pancakes with steady movements learned from years of routine. The coffee maker hummed beside him. Outside, the temperature hovered at 22 degrees, frost clinging to the edges of the windows like lace. Avery stepped into the kitchen quietly, unsure of her place in the daylight. Noah was already at the table, elbows planted, watching the skillet with deep concentration. You make them round every time, he said. Caleb allowed the smallest hint of a smile. Practice. Avery lingered near the doorway. You do not have to cook for me, she said. Caleb slid a pancake onto a plate and set it in front of her anyway. In this house, we eat together. 3 simple words. No debate. Noah grinned and poured syrup with exaggerated care, then looked up at Avery. You still coming with us later? She hesitated. To where? School, he answered. You said you were good at math. Caleb set the spatula down and met her eyes. You do not have to hide inside these walls. She shifted her weight, uncertainty flickering across her face. What if someone sees me? They will, Caleb replied calmly. And we will handle that. The words were not loud, but they carried weight. After breakfast, the 3 of them bundled up in coats and stepped into the crisp Colorado morning. Their boots crunched against the thin layer of snow that had settled overnight. Noah walked between them, swinging his backpack lightly, as if nothing in the world had changed. Avery walked slightly behind, watching Caleb as if trying to measure his resolve. At the elementary school drop-off, parents idled in pickup trucks, engines rumbling softly in the cold. A few glanced toward Avery, curious but not hostile. Caleb rested one hand on Noah's shoulder. Have a good day, he said. Noah nodded, and then surprised them both by turning to Avery. You can come to my basketball game tonight, he added. If you want. She blinked, caught off guard by the invitation. Okay, she said quietly. As Noah ran toward the school doors, Caleb and Avery stood side by side in the parking lot. The sky above was a clear winter blue, sharp and honest. You do not have to fight your father alone, Caleb said without looking at her. But I will not fight him for you. We will speak the truth. That is different. Avery studied the ground for a moment before lifting her chin. He will not like that. Caleb nodded once. Truth is not always comfortable. 3 short sentences. Steady. Measured. They drove home in silence, not strained, just thoughtful. When they pulled into the driveway, Caleb turned off the engine and faced her fully. You are not a guest here, he said. Guests wait to be invited. You knocked. That makes you part of the decision. Avery felt something shift inside her, something fragile but real. Not ownership, not dependency, something closer to belonging. And for the first time since she had walked 11 miles in the cold, she allowed herself to believe that staying might not mean being trapped. It might mean being seen. That evening the gym lights buzzed softly above the polished wooden court, and the faint smell of popcorn drifted from the concession stand as parents filled the metal bleachers with winter coats and quiet conversation. Caleb sat 2 rows up from the baseline, hands folded, posture straight but relaxed. Avery sat beside him, her fingers tucked into the sleeves of her sweater, eyes scanning the court as Noah jogged out with his team. That is him, she said, nodding toward the boy in jersey number 12. I know, Caleb replied. 3 words. Steady. Noah spotted them and waved, nearly tripping over his own sneakers in the process. A few parents glanced at Avery, curious about the unfamiliar face sitting next to Caleb. He did not explain. He did not perform introductions. He simply remained present. The whistle blew. The game began. Sneakers squeaked. The ball thudded rhythmically against hardwood. Avery leaned forward without realizing it, hands clasped together as Noah attempted a careful layup. He missed, then recovered the rebound and passed instead of forcing the shot. Caleb nodded once, subtle but approving. He is learning, Avery observed. He is, Caleb answered. Learning what? She asked. Caleb kept his eyes on the court. That you do not have to prove yourself every time you hold the ball. The words lingered. Avery swallowed slightly. My father always says if you hesitate, you lose. Caleb glanced at her briefly before returning his gaze to Noah. There is a difference between hesitation and patience. 3 short sentences. Measured. Intentional. On the court, Noah stole the ball unexpectedly and passed it cleanly to a teammate who scored. The small crowd clapped politely. Avery clapped too, more enthusiastically than she expected. She caught herself smiling. For a moment, she looked younger than 17. During halftime, Noah jogged over, breathless and flushed from effort. Did you see that? He asked, grinning. You passed instead of forcing it, Caleb said. Noah nodded proudly. Coach said trust the team. He turned to Avery. You coming next week too? The question was casual, but the hope behind it was not. Avery hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering. Yes, she said softly. If you want me there. Noah rolled his eyes in exaggerated disbelief. Of course I do. He ran back to the court before either of them could respond further. Avery watched him go, then leaned back against the cool metal of the bleacher. He trusts you, she said quietly. Caleb nodded. Trust is not loud. The game resumed, and the second half moved quickly. When the final buzzer sounded, the score did not matter as much as the small improvements, the teamwork, the visible growth. Caleb stood as the players lined up to shake hands. Avery stood too, mirroring him. You did not have to bring me, she said after a moment. Caleb adjusted his jacket. This is not bringing, he replied. This is living. 3 words again, simple and unpolished. As they stepped out into the cold night air, their breath forming white clouds under the parking lot lights, Avery realized something unfamiliar had taken root inside her. It was not fear of going back. It was not defiance. It was the quiet understanding that she had been invited into ordinary moments, not as a project, not as a problem, but as someone who belonged in the stands cheering when a 9-year-old chose patience over pride. The county building smelled faintly of old carpet and brewed coffee, the kind of institutional scent that clung to government offices across America. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Caleb, Avery, and Noah sat in a row of molded plastic chairs outside a door labeled Family Services Intake. Noah swung his legs back and forth, heels tapping lightly against the chair frame. Avery sat still, hands folded tightly in her lap, her knuckles pale. Caleb leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees, posture steady, as if waiting for a routine inspection rather than a decision that could shift the course of 3 lives. A woman in her early 40s stepped into the hallway holding a thin folder. Mr. Whitmore, she called. Caleb stood immediately. Yes, ma'am. 3 short words. Respectful. Grounded. They were led into a modest office with beige walls and a small American flag tucked behind a metal desk. The social worker, Ms. Hernandez, gestured for them to sit. Avery Collins, she began gently. Your father has expressed concern for your well-being. He would like you returned home today. Avery's jaw tightened, but she did not look away. I am not in danger here, she said carefully, and I did not feel safe there. The room grew quiet. Ms. Hernandez made a note in her folder. Can you explain what you mean by that? Avery inhaled slowly. I was not hurt, she said, but I was not heard. 3 sentences. Simple. Honest. Caleb did not interrupt. He did not fill the silence. He allowed her words to stand on their own. Ms. Hernandez turned to him. Mr. Whitmore, you understand that housing a minor without legal guardianship can become complicated. Caleb nodded. Once. I understand paperwork, he replied. I also understand winter. A brief pause followed. Ms. Hernandez looked at him more closely now, assessing not just the facts but the man. Did you encourage her to leave her father's home? She asked. No, Caleb answered. She arrived at my door. I offered warmth. That is all. The heater vent clicked softly beneath the window. Outside, a thin layer of snow reflected pale sunlight into the room. Ms. Hernandez folded her hands. Her father is a respected attorney in Denver, she said carefully. He insists that structure and discipline are being misinterpreted. Avery swallowed but kept her voice level. Control is not the same as care, she said. Caleb felt the weight of that sentence settle in the room. He spoke only after a measured breath. I am not trying to replace anyone, he said. I am trying to protect a child who asked for help. 3 sentences again. No anger. No accusation. Just clarity. Ms. Hernandez closed the folder gently. There will need to be a formal review, she said. Temporary placement may be considered while we investigate. Noah looked up at Caleb, confusion clouding his young face. Does that mean she stays? He whispered. Caleb placed a steady hand on his son's shoulder. It means we wait, he answered. As they left the office, Avery walked a little straighter than before. The hallway did not feel as suffocating. The uncertainty remained, but something else had entered the space alongside it. Not rebellion, not fear. It was the quiet realization that when she spoke, someone beside her did not speak over her. And sometimes that is the first form of safety a person ever learns to recognize. The waiting stretched into days, and days folded quietly into a fragile routine. Avery returned to school under temporary review status. Her name flagged in administrative systems, but her seat still present in the classroom. Caleb drove her each morning after dropping Noah off, the pickup truck rumbling steadily along the 2-lane highway that cut through fields dusted with leftover snow. Neither of them filled the drive with unnecessary words. The heater hummed. The tires hummed. The silence was not empty. It was thoughtful. On Thursday afternoon, a black sedan sat parked at the end of Caleb's gravel driveway when he pulled in. The car was polished, city clean, out of place against pine trees and frost-covered grass. A tall man in a tailored wool coat stood beside it, hands clasped behind his back. Avery froze before opening the truck door. That is him, she said quietly. Caleb turned off the engine. All right, he replied. 3 words. Calm. Avery stepped out slowly. The man's eyes moved over her with controlled restraint. Avery, he said, voice smooth and practiced. You have caused enough disruption. She stiffened. Caleb closed his door and walked around the front of the truck, positioning himself beside her, but not in front of her. Sir, Caleb said evenly, this is not a disruption. It is a conversation. The man's gaze shifted. You must be Mr. Whitmore. Yes. You are aware you are interfering with my parental authority. 3 short accusations, carefully delivered. Caleb did not react. I am aware that your daughter knocked on my door in 20-degree weather, he answered. I let her in. Avery's father inhaled sharply. She is dramatic. She misinterprets structure as oppression. Avery's voice, though quiet, did not tremble this time. I asked you to listen, she said. You told me to obey. The air between them tightened, but no one raised a hand or a voice. Caleb spoke again, measured and firm. She is not property, he said. She is a person. The words landed with more force than volume. A long pause followed. Wind moved through the trees behind the house, carrying the faint scent of pine. Finally, the man adjusted his coat. The review hearing is scheduled for Monday, he said. You will both be present. Caleb nodded. We will. The sedan door closed with a muted thud. The car pulled away down the gravel drive, leaving a thin trail of dust and silence behind it. Avery remained still, watching until it disappeared around the bend. He will not change, she said softly. Caleb did not look at her. People rarely change because they are forced, he replied. They change when they are confronted with truth. 3 sentences. No hostility. Just realism. Avery exhaled, a breath she had been holding for years. What if they make me go back, she asked. Caleb finally met her eyes. Then we keep speaking, he said. Respectfully, clearly, without fear. She studied his expression, searching for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign that he might step away when things became complicated. She did not find it. The house behind them stood small but steady against the wide Colorado sky. Avery realized then that belonging is not declared in grand gestures. It is revealed in moments when someone stands beside you, not to fight for you, but to stand with you. Monday arrived with a sky the color of brushed steel, low clouds pressing gently over Cedar Ridge as if the town itself were holding its breath. The county hearing room was smaller than Avery expected, more like a classroom than a courtroom, with folding chairs arranged in rows and a long table set at the front. Caleb sat beside her, hands folded loosely, shoulders squared but relaxed. Noah remained at home with a neighbor, unaware of how much this day could change. Avery's father sat across the room in a tailored navy suit, legal pad resting neatly in front of him. He did not look angry. He looked prepared. The mediator, A gray-haired woman with calm eyes and a measured tone began without ceremony. "This is not about winning," she said. "This is about well-being." 3 simple words that felt heavier than any accusation. Avery was asked to speak first. She stood, palms slightly damp, and faced the table. "I did not leave because I wanted freedom," she said carefully. "I left because I wanted to breathe." The room remained still. She continued, "There are rules in my father's house. Many rules. But there is no space for disagreement. No space for fear. No space for my voice." Her father shifted slightly in his chair, but he did not interrupt. The mediator nodded and turned to him. "Mr. Collins?" He rose smoothly. "Structure is not cruelty," he said. "Discipline is not oppression. My daughter is bright. She has a future that requires focus. I will not apologize for guiding her." His words were articulate, persuasive, precise. Avery felt their weight, but she did not look down. The mediator then turned to Caleb. "Mr. Whitmore, what is your position?" Caleb stood without haste. "I am not here to challenge anyone's authority," he said. "I am here because a young woman walked 11 miles in 20-degree weather and asked for warmth." 3 sentences. Clear. Unembellished. He continued. "She followed every rule in my home. She helped my son with homework. She showed up for dinner. She asked to be heard. That is all." The mediator studied him for a long moment. "Would you be willing to serve as a temporary guardian while family counseling is arranged?" she asked. Caleb did not hesitate. "Yes." Avery's father exhaled slowly, the first visible crack in his composed exterior. "This is unnecessary," he said. The mediator met his gaze steadily. Sometimes distance creates perspective. Silence settled again, but it felt different now. Not tense. Not hostile. Just honest. After a brief private consultation, the mediator returned with her decision. Temporary placement would continue under review. Family counseling would be required. Avery would not be forced to return immediately. The words were procedural, but their impact was not. Avery felt something inside her unclench for the first time in years. Caleb did not celebrate. He did not gloat. He simply nodded once in acknowledgement. Outside, as they stepped into the cold afternoon air, the clouds had begun to thin. Pale sunlight filtered through, touching the frost along the sidewalk. Avery looked at Caleb, eyes bright but steady. "You did not argue," she said. He shook his head gently. "I did not need to." 3 words again. Quiet. Certain. And in that quiet certainty, Avery understood something deeper than protection. She understood dignity. Spring arrived quietly in Cedar Ridge, melting the last traces of snow along the fence line behind Caleb's house, and turning the air softer, easier to breathe. The temporary placement stretched from weeks into months, and counseling sessions became part of the rhythm of life, scheduled between basketball practices and homework at the kitchen counter. There were no dramatic confrontations, no raised voices echoing down hallways. There were conversations. Some awkward, some painful, some unexpectedly honest. Avery began splitting time carefully, supervised visits with her father arranged through the mediator, evenings still spent beneath the steady glow of Caleb's porch light. Nothing changed overnight. That was the point. Change that lasts rarely announces itself loudly. On a warm May afternoon, nearly 6 months after the first knock on that winter door, the high school auditorium filled with folding chairs and proud families. A banner stretched across the stage read Academic Recognition Ceremony. Avery stood backstage in a simple navy dress, holding a thin sheet of paper with her name printed at the top. Her hands were steady. Caleb sat in the 4th row beside Noah, who wore a collared shirt that did not quite hide his restless energy. "She is going to win, right?" Noah whispered. Caleb allowed a faint smile. "She already has," he replied. 3 words. Quiet certainty. Avery's father sat several rows away, posture composed, eyes focused forward. Counseling had not transformed him into a different man, but it had softened the edges. He listened more now. He paused before speaking. Sometimes that is where growth begins. The principal stepped to the microphone and began announcing scholarship recipients. When Avery Collins' name was called for a state academic grant, the applause was polite at first, then warmer as she crossed the stage. She accepted the certificate with both hands and approached the microphone for her brief remarks. The auditorium settled. 6 months ago, she began, voice clear but gentle. "I thought strength meant control. I thought safety meant silence." She paused, scanning the crowd. I was wrong. The room remained still. Strength is patience. Safety is being heard. She glanced toward Caleb, then toward her father. Sometimes the bravest thing someone can do is open a door and not ask for anything in return. 3 sentences. Simple. True. Caleb did not shift in his seat. He did not draw attention to himself. He simply met her gaze. Avery took a small breath. When I knocked on a stranger's door in the cold, I was not looking for escape. I was looking for dignity. Her voice softened, but it did not break. And I found a father. The words hung in the air. Not shouted. Not dramatic. Just undeniable. Noah's eyes widened. Caleb remained still for a moment longer than anyone expected, then gave a single nod, the kind that carries more meaning than applause. The audience rose slowly to its feet. Even Avery's father stood, his expression thoughtful rather than defensive. Outside the auditorium, the late afternoon sun cast long golden lines across the parking lot. Life did not suddenly become perfect. Papers still needed signatures. Conversations still required courage. But something irreversible had happened. A girl who once walked 11 miles in 20-degree weather now walked across a stage with her head high. And a man who opened his door without hesitation understood that sometimes the greatest title in the world is not earned through authority, but through quiet grace.